back to the quote that we heard earlier from St. John Chrysostom. It starts out, how do they become one flesh?
Well, as if she were gold receiving the purest of gold, the woman receives the man's seed with rich pleasure, and within her it is nourished, cherished, and refined.
Their intercourse affects the joining of their bodies, and they are made one, just as perfume is mixed with ointment. As you can see from St. John Chrysostom's words, sex is a very vital and life-giving part of our marriage relationship.
Yep, it is.
But isn't it strange that as vital and life-giving as it is, what a terrible time we all have talking about it?
Yep, and I'm not the one that has a problem talking about it. She does.
Yes, but it's part of it's what we bring into the relationship. Yes, I was a farm girl growing up, but we didn't have the kind of farm where you had boy animals and girl animals. You just grew up knowing the facts of life. We had row crops. The seeds went in the ground, they grew. So that's all I knew until I was in middle school. And I thought my friend was lying to me when she told me about the birds and the bees.
Oh yeah, and of course I'm a city boy. And of course there's a lot you learn on the streets. And there's a lot you learn from your friends who are telling you about the latest dirty joke and getting together and quietly talking behind everybody's back about things that mom and dad says, not yet, you're not ready.
Yeah, and so then you have to understand, I think each of us as we step into our marriages, we come in with a different perspective of what's okay to talk about and what's not okay to talk about. And
it's actually, and it's actually quite interesting because men and women deal with sex differently. Absolutely.
And yet Gottman talks about how for women, we have prerequisites. And if those prerequisites aren't met, it ain't gonna happen. So, yeah. So there's a bit of a disconnect there, but that's...
Interesting conversation, folks.
Interesting conversation.
Guys, for instance, are, let's face it, we're kind of just ready. We just are very comfortable in our body in certain things, and we have no problem wanting to just engage.
I have to say, though, when we got married, we had to learn some very interesting lessons. One of the things that we've learned is what happens in the bedroom is completely affected by what happens outside the bedroom. And if we're not paying attention to those things outside the bedroom, inside the bedroom is not going to be as good as it could be.
Okay, so I'm going to back her up a little bit here, okay? Because let's just start outside the bedroom from the beginning. Because we got married, and unfortunately she had food poisoning from the rehearsal dinner. So the marriage day got very interesting from the beginning. But let's just fast forward past the actual wedding and the reception to the point where we finally went home and something was going to happen that I had been looking forward to for a heck of a long time.
And he carried me over the threshold.
I tried, okay, but she wasn't feeling very well, okay?
She was really sick.
And so we went upstairs and I took a look at her and she put on this nightgown.
5 shades of green.
And the nightgown was a flannel nightgown all the way up to the neck.
And here, down to the ankles.
And yeah. I put her into bed, I kissed her goodnight, and I slept on the couch.
Yeah, and then we had a honeymoon week, which was really wonderful.
That was good.
And at the end of that week, I was
again.
Not feeling well, went in to see the doctor, and wound up undergoing treatments for the next 6 months that made the bedroom a little bit off limits for us. It was a little bit hard, but I think that's when we understood how important it was to have rituals of connection in our relationship.
And so that's where we take the rituals connection, because there are different ways that in essence we can bring our sexuality, utilizing creativity into a relationship. And it doesn't have to do with intercourse all the time.
No. And in fact, there's this very sweet story that we heard several years back about a couple that wanted to make sure the other one was constantly reminded of their love for the other. And so, yes, you see this? SHMILY, see how much I love you. And what they did is they left this message around the house in places where they knew the other one would find it.
There were notes that went into the lunchbox, for instance.
Notes in the lunchbox. Or he knew that she would bake, so he would trace it in the top of the flour. So when she would take the lid off of the flour jar, there it would be.
Lipstick on the mirrors with a little love note.
Yep. Or writing it in the steam, on the mirror.
And it wasn't her writing in the lipstick. Sometimes it was him.
Yeah, but it was just a sweet ritual connection that the two of them had as a constant reminder to the other of their connection. And that connection outside the bedroom, I guarantee, followed them into the bedroom at the end of the day. Then I think we're going to pass the ball on over to Father Vasily up in Alaska.
Hello up there in Snowland.
Thank you, Father Jim and Pres Donna. This is Father Vasily up here in Anchorage, Alaska. And I'll be honest with you guys, this is not an easy thing to talk about. So I've been given the task of speaking to the group tonight about bids for sexual intimacy and how to handle no. And it's not an easy subject to talk about with our spouse. It's really not an easy subject to talk about with a group. And it's really, from a point of view of a priest, we know how important sex is in our marriages, but there's not a great place to talk about this in the church. I can't talk about it on Sunday during a homily. So this is a good opportunity to discuss something that's so important. Sex plays an integral part of our marriage, and so it's healthy to be able to communicate about it and to bring Christ into it. And that's really what we're trying to do, is bring Christ into our marriages, into all facets of our marriage. Sex is not something that's dirty or that we should feel shame about unless we've introduced something sinful. So we want to bring Christ into this aspect of our marriage as well. In general, men will use sexual intimacy in order to connect with their spouse, and in general, women will want to feel connected to their spouse before engaging in sexual intimacy. So already we are bringing into our marriages this inherent disconnect, and it can make it difficult to talk about. We may be speaking different languages and going past each other and triggering different things in one another. So it's important to talk about it. And in general, men are going to desire physical intimacy more often than the women are. So in a marriage, it's most often the wife, not always the case, but it is most often the wife that is saying no or rejecting bids for physical intimacy. And these reasons could vary, and you've already heard about them. You'll read about this in the book, but sometimes, especially if there's children in the home already, the wife is just feeling exhausted. She's too tired. She may feel that she's not very beautiful at that moment, and she might just not feel connected. And speaking directly to the men, most of these reasons have nothing to do with you. We'll talk about the connectedness in a little bit, and that does have to do with you, but the other reasons could have nothing to do with you at all. It's not always about you. The problem is, for men, when we hear no, it may trigger something deep inside of us. And this is where we need to talk about attachment science for a little bit. So attachment science helps us understand that as infants and children, we may have not had all of our needs or expectations met by our parents. We may not have felt our parents close enough to us. We may have cried out and did not get a response as soon as we wanted, or the right response, the response that we felt we needed from our parents. And these denied calls for closeness with our parents create a wound. And these wounds stay inside of us as emotional memory. They're not conscious, but they're unconscious. And our emotional memory has these things stored. So when we go to our wife, our spouse, and make a bid for physical intimacy, and we are rejected, it can trigger something deep inside of us. That's an emotional response. And that emotional response may be something that's so powerful that it surprises even us and makes it really difficult for us to think clearly and to be reasonable and to understand that the no or the rejection is not a rejection of us as a person, that we're not being rejected, but just that our wife isn't into it at the moment. And again, this is difficult, especially for men to hear. I know also for women, but especially for men. If men do not feel desired, I believe this is in the chapter you're going to read, most men would rather be fired from their job than be turned down when they make bids for sexual intimacy. So that says a lot about how men define themselves and how they consider themselves as a person, that they need this part of their life to be fulfilled in order to feel like a man, to feel like a true person. And again, we can smile at this because in a way it's really ridiculous, yet at the same time, we have this imprinted deep, deep inside of us. So it's something that we need to acknowledge and do our best to explain and understand.
When it comes to frequency of sex, a lot of couples ask, well, what's normal? How often is everybody doing it?
Well, it goes to couple and male to female, and it's all over the map.
Yeah. I think every single couple has to figure out what their normal is going to be. But one thing is there are differences between male and female, and for 90% of the couples, they would agree that
for men, we use sex to feel connected.
And for women, we need to feel emotionally connected in order to have sex. And so...
Which is a disconnect sometimes.
Yeah, we're coming from two different places. And I love how in the book they talk about the prerequisites for sex for women, and it's right here.
Sexual desire for women is a barometer for how the rest of her world is going.
If she's not rested or happy or healthy or feeling supported and loved, she's not going to feel like having sex.
Oh my goodness, that's so true.
One of the problems that I've seen in marriages is that one spouse or the other will not feel connected to the other person. And this lack of connection, of course, makes them unwilling to engage in physical intimacy as often as the other would like. And it's this lack of connection that's the problem. However, they find it difficult to explain why they're feeling this lack of connection, that they feel unsupported, that they feel unloved, or that they feel taken advantage of. And instead of talking about what's really the problem, they use the church or asceticism and personal piety as an excuse to turn down bids for physical intimacy. And this is really, really dangerous and unhealthy, and I've seen it destroy marriages. So there is a place for asceticism in our marriages. There's a place for accepting no and using that to draw closer to God, to practice self-denial. There's a place for saying yes when we don't really feel like it, again, in order to practice self-denial and draw nearer to God by serving our spouse. But we should never use the church, even the church's canons, to say no to our spouse and to turn them down when they make bids for physical intimacy, unless we have come together, first of all, we've come together and talked about fasting, that we're going to fast at such and such a time because the church guides us this way and we're going to agree to do it. Then I think it's okay when one makes a bid for physical intimacy to respond with, hey, we agreed we were going to take a break for a while in order to focus on Christ, to focus on the fast, right? To focus during Lent or one of the other fasting periods. The church gives us ample opportunities to practice this physical fasting, whether it's Wednesdays and Fridays or one of the fasting periods, or even Saturday night before we receive Holy Communion. These are all options for us to practice self-denial, again, in order to focus on prayer. However, these are not in the canons. They should not be used as weapons against our spouse simply because we've moved past it or because we don't feel connected, so we don't want to do it. So I think we should adopt some ascetical practices. I think we should practice physical fasting at times, but only when both agree. And this is what St. Paul says as well, is that both agree to do this, so that it's not one forcing another. We don't want one forcing another in either direction. We want to bend towards one another and practice self-denial for the sake of one another without losing our own personhood, without coercion, without guilt, and without shame.
You know, your sexual relationship is going to ebb and flow depending on what happens in your day-to-day life and through the events that happen in your lives.
A discussion about sex after parenthood, because once children arrive, it does begin to influence what happens.
But it doesn't necessarily mean, and it never will ever mean, that the attraction is not there, nor that you can't actually continue to keep it alive, keep it active, and revive it when it needs to be revived.
Kids, get in here. I got Mickey Mouse on the TV. It's mommy, daddy, alone time.
Okay, but only if I can wash my hair at the same time.
Yeah, of course.
Okay. Mom! Mommy's on the toilet! Morning.
Morning. Go, 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 go. The kids are occupied. We have about 5 minutes until they're bored.
Mom! Dad!
It's your turn.
Fine.
The better, the worse, the in-betweens, baby. I'm gonna give you my everything from now on. Won't have to walk this road alone. Oh, my yesterdays and my tomorrows, all my laughter and my sorrow. Yeah, your heart is the only one I know. Oh, till the stars fall out of the sky and the rivers, they all run dry. Baby, you're mine, only one. Till the silver that runs through our hair, don't you know that I'll always be there? Baby, I swear, till my days on this earth are done, you're the only one.